Jase Robertson, welcome to the Chad Silveus Show.
Glad to be here, man.
Now, Jase Robertson, obviously most of our listeners probably know because it's the most watched reality show in television history, but you are one of the stars of Duck Dynasty. And I've made no secret on my show that I'm a huge fan of Duck Dynasty. I'm a huge fan of the Robertson family. And, if I sat down and think about it, if I try to count out on one hand, who are some of the people I would love to sit down and talk to, Jase Robertson is at the top of that list. So I'm glad to have you on the show.
Well, thanks, man. It's good to be here. I mean, who would have thought that? You said some of those things. I forget about that show. It seemed like a blur, even though it was 5 years of my life. But I think it resonated with people because we just had made the decision we were going to be true to ourselves. And even though our partnership with the production company was kind of wonky, because in the reality world, they tend to try to steer or create drama and things like that. And we were just stubborn enough to say, let's just be who we are. If people like it, we can reproduce it. And I really think that's why it took off, because we weren't ashamed of the way we live and operate. So, but I appreciate that.
Well, that's the sense that I get from watching the show. And that's part of the attraction of it is that, I know for a fact that reality TV is not all reality, but there was something about you guys, the personalities, the magic together. And part of that magic was it seemed real, even in an industry that's not really based on reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really what happened. I mean, in the inner workings of it, it was kind of a war every day because they wanted to do it their certain way. I mean, I remember day one, they were like, okay, let's have all the wives go out and shoot breakfast, with weapons. And I'm like, let me tell you right now, my wife, she don't like the woods. She likes that I go out, what I call God's grocery store. But I said, why don't we just do what we normally do? But so we would fight from day one all throughout it. And I think once it got to the actual TV, there was some magic in that because we were passionate about our way of life and about staying to our values. So it was like it was a mess on the inside, but it produced something kind of cool.
It's one of those things that I think comes along once in a very long time because, one of the things I've said in the show before, and I'll say it to you because it was the first time we've talked, for the past 25 years, I don't think there's a new television show I've liked besides Duck Dynasty.
Yeah, I think they do them like cookie cutter style. They get a formula, and we saw that they presented that formula, but call it ignorance or we were just happy with nothing because most of my life, we didn't have any money. We just lived off the land because we have our faith in Jesus, and we're unashamed about that. We love each other as a family. And we're just not a real materialistic family. So when they would come in and kind of threaten, all these perks, we're not going to do this, or we're like, fine, let's just not do the show. We're not going to be something we're not. So in a way, it was kind of, to quote our president, it was the art of the deal by accident. We were just willing to walk away if we had to compromise our values, and that's why it turned out to be successful.
Without knowing you until now, I would guess that that's how you would operate. Just from watching the show, you can pick that up.
Oh, that's the way it is. I mean, that's why a lot of people that didn't like our show, they thought it was some kind of ploy. I mean, I would see on the internet pictures of when we would go to the beach every year and we'd be clean shaven. And so these people who, attacked us, they were like, look, we've uncovered this secret life. These guys are really yuppies who are highly educated. And they would show the beach pictures that we put on the internet. And what they fail to realize is that, our business is about hunting season because we make duck calls. So every year we would grow our beards out because my dad, he's always been like that ever since he moved my family out to the river. He said, I'm going to commercial fish the river. I'm going to hunt and I'm going to build duck calls and I'm going to grow my beard out and I'm just going to live a free life. And he kind of did it, as a way to represent his new life change when he came to the Lord. And I was about 7 or 8 years old when that happened. And so every year we would just, I don't know why, basically because a beard was useful. We would let our beards grow out during hunting season and just look as rough and rugged as we could and hunt every day. It would keep our face warm. But it was more just, we're living out in the elements as men. I mean, that was basically what it is. But then since we all have wives who do not, exactly care for that look long term, we would shave after hunting season. I mean, all my brothers, we did the same. I've done that pattern for 20 years until Duck Dynasty hit. And so that's kind of the backstory on that. Of course, once we started filming the show, they wanted us to look like this all the time. As in fact, they put it in our contract that we had to maintain our winter appearance.
Well, first of all, I'm proud to say that I do have a beard, but my beard is because of pure laziness. I hate shaving, so.
Look, I'm a big proponent for the beard. I mean, you just think about it. I'll give you just a few things off the top of my head. Number one, you're saving a lot of money. Number two, it keeps your face warm. It's great sunscreen in the summer months, but it keeps your face warm in the winter. Plus, when you think about it, it's a security thing. People don't, like me, that nobody's going to try to mug me. When they see me, I mean, number one, they think this guy doesn't have anything. Number two, it's just not worth it. And, my wife comments that on that all the time. It's like when I go into a grocery store, if somebody recognizes me from the show, it's different. But if they don't know who I am, I mean, they're watching me carefully. Same thing in the airport. I mean, it's just you're either a security threat or some guy off of Duck Dynasty or, somebody who wanted to be on Duck Dynasty. I mean, there's no other middle ground. Yeah, so I don't mind.
I talk to my daughter about the same thing. There's something, sometimes it's unsettling to other people when they see a man with a beard. It's I don't know what it is, but it's intimidating.
It's not like when you think about this. People say, why are you growing a beard? I'm like, I'm not growing a beard. It's doing that on its own. That's the way I was made. I believe I was made in the image of God, and hair is coming forth from my face. I don't mind being noted as a man from a distance. It's just something that I think is a good, positive thing.
It's an unnatural thing to shave. That's not how God intended. So that's great.
Yeah, when you kind of break it down, my dad always he says everything graphically and barbarically, but sometimes he really has a point. And he'll say, I've heard him say this 100 times. He's like, I mean, the last thing I want to do is grab a razor and just start scraping my face every day. He's like, that can't be healthy for your skin. But I think he's right, because look, when I shaved after the show, I've shaved once in 10 years, fully shaved, and that was after the show, and I did it to raise money for my daughter's charity, which is helps kids with the cleft lip and palate, and miamoo.org is where we help a lot of kids and families who are born with that cleft lip and palate. But when I shaved and did that, I looked in the mirror and it was scary. I mean, my skin it really looked like a baby's skin. Of course, it was so uncomfortable and awkward. I've been so long since I've done that. I didn't shave again. It was just a one-time deal. So I'm fully back. But I think it's good to air out every once in a while. But I was shocked at how my skin looked, So I know it's a positive thing long term to have a beard.
Well, I mean, it's been 7 years for me. I get the itch sometimes. I feel like I need to let my skin breathe, but I haven't done it yet. I haven't taken that plunge. Now, I want to talk more about what your life is like today after Duck Dynasty, but let me hit a few questions to do with Duck Dynasty. Some questions that I think that some of the viewers may have. You may have covered this at some point in time in the show. You may have not on some of these things, but one question that I think a lot of people have is, my daughter asked me this question. She's 8. She asked why do Jase and Willie and Jep, why do they call their mom and dad by their first name?
Oh, you know what? I get that. I do events now, which is kind of answering a couple of your questions there. I was doing a lot. I mean, as in 30 to 50 a year. Now because that's a little bit too much, and I want to be home. I do probably 10 to 20 a year, and I'll do a Q&A at the event. And that is like the number one question. So people found that weird because I think in the South it's a sign of disrespect. But here's my answer. I'm not real sure why we did that, but my theory was when we were little kids, our business was attached to our house, which we sold duck calls and sporting goods things. So when people would call, it was usually a business call. And it just seemed weird to say, let me get my mom or my dad. I mean, nobody said that, but it just seemed weird. And so we had, we were sophisticated back then. We had two lines, line one and line two. And so you would say, we had a little intercom, you would say Phil line one or, K line two. And I think that's just where it started. And then that was just the habit we got into because we would get a lot of calls and we didn't have a secretary. Me and my brothers, we were the secretaries because my dad, he kind of has this phobia against phones. I mean, he's never had a cell phone, and even the one that's attached to the wall, he just acts weird when he gets on it. It's like he's hollering. It's like he's saying he doesn't realize that we're hearing you loud and clear, but he thinks since you're 100 miles away, I got to talk 4 times louder. And so it's from that old age, So look, that's my theory on that. They don't view it as something disrespectful at all. And maybe another side of that is, my family's really close. We seem more like friends, after we got out of high school than we do mom and dad, I guess. I mean, my best friends in the world are my parents, and which is kind of weird. I mean, besides my immediate family, but so they're that way with all my family. So that may be a contributing factor also.
That was one of my questions. So they didn't sit you down and say, "Don't call us mom and dad."
Oh no, there was never. It's never been addressed, and my parents have never said, "Why do you call me K?" or But, I do call my mom sometimes, but my dad, he's always just Phil. It's a very good question.
Speaking of your dad, hearing you speak about your father, I'm realizing more and more I have more in common with him than I thought. I don't own a cell phone either. I haven't used a cell phone in 7 years. So.
Really? Yeah. Well, now look, he's so far against it because he's like, boy, I tell you, the evil that goes on there,
Right.
And technically he's right, but he's a little hypocritical because we'll be in the duck blind and he'll be like, because he'll just get on a cell phone rant. And then 5 minutes later, he'll be like, one of y'all get on those cell phones and call Miss K and tell her to start dinner, put the rice on. And I'm like, what happened to this cell phone is always bad stuff, until you need it. Or we're like, you get turned around in the woods or a vehicle breaks down. He's like, get on the cell phone. I'm like, well, you're liking me having a cell phone now,
Yeah, it's the same with me. It's nice when my wife and I aren't about and I'm like, we need to figure out something. We're out in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, make a phone call. So I'm the same way. So.
No doubt. Look, this year we had this is a interesting happening. We had so thick of a fog when we were trying to get to the duck blind this year, and we had really flood water, so we had to ride in a boat for 1.5 miles, and the fog was so thick. When I say you could not see 5 feet in front of you, and we had 2 boats. But what we ended up doing is we put the GPS on the cell phone, and we basically navigated using that on the phone. And of course, he was a little dubious about it, but he got in there behind me, and we made it, to the duck blind. And I'm like, "What do you think about this cell phone now?" And he was like, "I wouldn't have believed it in 1,000 years." Hilarious. But look, here's my take. It's like anything else in our society. It's what you use it for, and it's what you put your time doing, and it's how you manage your time. Now, look, as a guy having teenagers that live in this house, I've had to have some come to Jesus meetings over this cell phone because a lot of these apps now, especially in the teenage world, you realize they're designed for, for teenagers to have this privacy, and they're not held accountable. And I don't want to throw any of them under the bus, but they all know who they are. And I had no idea that my kid was being subject to this, for hours and hours. They get on these little sites and they have these private worlds and, talk like gangsters, and it's just all bad. And so one of the things I did when I discovered this, because I told my daughter, I was like, go get your phone. I want to check it out. I said, is there anything on this phone that I'm going to find that's disturbing? She's like, no, which is why she got in trouble, because I know all these friends from Hollywood and all these little geeks who can, find stuff that your daughter doesn't want you to find. And so about an hour later, I went back up there and got her out of bed and said, I thought you said I wasn't going to find anything on here that was disturbing, And she was shocked. So what I did is I got on those sites, these little social media sites, and I formed a group chat for all her friends. And I was like, this is Mia's dad. Things have changed. If you want to continue being a friend to her, you bring your mom over to my house and we're going to have a talk. And so the first one I did, there was like 8 friends of hers, and 6 of the 8 came to this house, and we sat down and talked about it, because they wanted to be friends with her, but they realized they were doing things that they shouldn't be doing, So I know that's a long rant, but I want to get that out, because I'm like, I want to protect my kids from anything that's, a poison to their decision-making processes.
I'm glad that you brought that up, and I love that, because it's funny watching the show. One of the things that I think about you from being a viewer and not knowing you personally is I bet he's just a great parent. And I'll tell you right now, your rant was like you're barking up the right tree or whatever. You're a father after my own heart.
I'm going to say this right now. One thing I've learned about being a parent is the number one thing, my number one goal is to try, to get my kids to heaven, because as a believer in Jesus, that's what I want to do. But the byproduct of that is it gives them principles that are meaningful in life, whether you believe in Jesus or not. I mean, everything, the Bible represents, these are all good things. The bad things about religion is where, people mess that up. I mean, you look at some religions, if you have priests or whatever, if they're, molesting kids, well, that's obviously terrible. But it was the people who made these bad choices. But these principles are solid. So, I'm trying to get those in my kid's life. But you said about being a great parent. What I've learned is the number one thing I have to do, with my kids is tell them I make mistakes, and you're going to have to overcome in life, the mistakes I make. Because, at heart, we all make mistakes. But one thing I am going to do is I'm not going to let, a bunch of 9th grade girls influence my daughter, especially if they're being immature and are doing things that are dangerous, because some of these sites, you have predators, and I could see where that would happen. Some older guy would come in there and start, having a chat with my daughter, and I responded to him. Every time I saw that happen, I'm like, you got to, if you want to talk to my daughter, come over here. And this, I'm her dad, which that you look up and they like deleted their account. And so I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and let some predator, come in here, and I'm going to protect my daughter.
Well, I have a daughter as well, so all this is resonating with me.
Oh, well, cool. How old is she?
She's 8 years old. Actually, you're going to speak with her in a moment, because I do a segment on my show. It's called One Question with Violet. And so she's going to ask you a question here in a few minutes.
Still, look, you're still just, everything's great and awesome. And, that's a great age. When they get, my daughter's 15, they get to that age, and then all of a sudden, you start getting nervous.
Well, I've got a 21-year-old son, so I've been through it with a boy, but not a girl.
Yeah, and I have 2 older boys as well, and we went through the same process. But it's something about that daughter. I mean, and I'm the reason I'm glad we got on this cell phone, because I'm like, as parents, you can't just give a kid a cell phone and then think they're going to make the right decision. I mean, it's a dangerous thing. Getting back to what my dad said, it's a dangerous thing to put into somebody's hand because of the quickness of the access of the entire world. and then expect them to make rational, mature decisions. I mean, it's something I believe every parent has to stay on top of.
Well, agreed. And honestly, when I was that age, if I would have had a cell phone back then, they didn't have them. I don't know what I would have done.
Oh, well, I'm the
Right.
same way. It wouldn't have been good because you're not mature enough to make those decisions. It's almost like a fantasy world that we've created where you can be what you want to be and you can talk. It's like, I'm saying all these things I saw, and you would think that would embarrass my daughter, but I realized everything's embellished on the internet. It's like you would never say some of these things to a person that's face to face. And I think that's why you see the rise of these podcasts, which is what I'm doing now. My dad and I just started a podcast. It's called Unashamed with Phil Robertson. So people that want to listen to it, they can listen. But it basically talks about biblical truths. We're going from cover to cover through it, but in a kind of a real, Duck Dynasty way, I guess, where you're dealing with spiritual truths. But I couldn't figure out why this podcast is taking off, and I realized that people don't have conversations anymore face to face. And so it's like become a thing now. Oh, there's actually people talking face to face about real life, things is now cool, which is crazy because most of it's fantasy world, where you're trying to be something that you're really not on the internet via all these social media websites.
I completely agree. I think it handicaps our children socially.
Well, there's no doubt. And I think it depends on their personality. Some of them it's worse than others. Some people then have a fear of going to social places and talking to people because they're way more comfortable just doing it on the phone. But some kids, I don't think it affects as much. I have one of my sons. It didn't really seem to bother him. My other son, I gave him my phone. I checked it 24 hours later. I'm like, well, you will no longer have a phone. You didn't last 24 hours on this. His Google searches were awful. So I waited 2 weeks, gave him the phone. 24 hours later, I check it. I'm like, well, now it's going to be 2 months because you're still not getting this. So I gave him the phone back after 2 months. I check it 24 hours later. I said, you know what? When you graduate high school, I will give you your phone back. And that's what happened. And look, it didn't do any damage to him. After high school, I gave him his phone back and I said, okay, welcome to the real world. Make good decisions.
And I think that like in this crazy world we live in, I think the bottom line is with parenting, and that's one of the great things about your show and people to be able to see your show and your family, is that you guys have such a common sense approach to all areas of life, with God and family, parenting. Now, I do want to say another thing about the show, asking another question. Now, when I was watching the show, there's an episode that came up where you had come in contact with the homeowners association. I love that whole scenario because I could relate to it so much. I remember we moved into our first house, my wife and I, and we've got a notice from the homeowners association about some dandelions in my yard. And I said to her, what is a homeowner association? How can they tell us what to do with their own property? And to see you reacting the way you did on the show.
Oh, look, that was probably, a lot of things on our show was real time. Like we would just show up somewhere or the camera people would show up and we would just do. A lot of it, they would interview me and Willie during the week. We were the main, I guess, he and I were in the bowels of the making process of the show. And they would just interview us before the week's events. And they were like, what's going on? And that particular show came up because in real life, in real time, all the people affiliated with the homeowners were just mad at me over the things that we filmed, the burying fish guts in the flower beds, which is perfectly good, fertilizer. It's just common sense, having the chickens. And so I told them, I was like, y'all need to do a show about this mess I got going on with the homeowners, which what happened was when the show came out and all these producers started interviewing all the people in my neighborhood, it's just like anything else. TV changes their opinion. Well, then they were kind of embarrassed about it because when you look at things from a common sense viewpoint, it kind of made them like, what are we doing here? Now they played along for the show, but all those things that were on that show were real. I mean, they were blackballing me in the neighborhood about the chickens. And what's weird is after the show, I mean, this is what's weird. Everybody in my neighborhood now has chickens. I mean, it's a nice neighborhood, but that was one thing that was worth doing the show over, because I mean, there's nothing greater to me to eat than a freshly laid chicken egg. And so and because the sophisticated side of life, all they do is call that organic and charge $2 more, a carton, and it took off.
With your dealings with the homeowners association now, then you're saying after the show they're pretty good?
They're way better. I mean, every once in a while, because they make all these rules and charge, I'm paying money for them, which I didn't even know at the time that they're actually,
Yes.
I'm like, we're actually paying them money to make rules and make our life miserable. It's way better, but for most people, they're not going to have that same experience, I mean, the embarrassment of national TV changed the way our homeowners kind of operates here. But what I'm saying is, for the most part, that's not going to happen to the normal person,
No, it's not. They're a pain. They're just a pain no matter where you go.
I mean, because they thought it was cool about being on TV, and so they actually backed up. Now, when I have some crazy idea, they're way more open-minded to it. But it took something drastic for that to happen. Most people, that's not going to happen. I was just being totally transparent here. It embarrassed them to the point to where most of the rules that are frivolous, they backed off on. And some of the other things that they do as far as neighborhood watch and all, okay, I'm fine with that. If you want to try to help find a way to protect my family, from midnight to 5 a.m, I'm down with that, And I was like, I tell you what, I'll take the 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock segment, because that's when I get up during hunting season, and I'm up and about anyway. And we have a problem since our show is, there's a few crazies out there that watched our show that think it's a good idea to, try to show up on my doorstep at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because they showed up at the business too, right? Or do they still?
Oh, do they show up at the business? Yes. I mean, that's still going on to this day. You can drive by, Duck Commander, and there are people taking pictures under the sign, and we don't mind that. I mean, it's a good thing for our community, and our show was where, we showed our true selves. So, people come into our churches and different things, which they still do. We're fine with that. I mean, it kind of resonated with people, and they feel like they know us. And so we don't feel like we're stars or anything that way. I mean, look, I'm just a duck hunter, country boy from Louisiana. So when I'm at the grocery store and somebody says, "Hey, Jase, what's going on?" I stop and have a chat with them, I mean, it's just a different set of circumstances from the celebrity world, because very few shows do you represent yourself, I mean, if I was, in some movie where I was playing a character, it'd be different, but people know us, and that's fine. We're just ordinary people, so we don't mind the attention from that. But like I said, there's always, this 0.01% that's just kind of crazy, and they don't realize, look, it was a show. It's not that big a deal.
Well, I guess that's the price of fame, and you guys are so famous. The show is just so popular still to this day, and you're not even making new episodes right now.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, if I go, we just went to New York promoting our podcast. I was surprised in the commercial airport how many people still recognize them. I mean, it was kind of surprising, but it's a good problem, like I said.
Well, speaking of speaking with your fans, I do have a segment on my show, One Question with Violet, and she is a huge fan. So if you just bear with me for just a moment while I go grab her, I'm going to step out of the studio and grab her. So I'll be right back.
Go for it. Let's do it.
All right, Jase, are you there?
Go for it.
Here is one question with my beautiful daughter, Violet Silveus. Here you go, Violet.
How is your daughter Mia doing?
Great question, Violet. Everybody, had a soft spot in their heart when we did that episode about all the surgery she's had. And her life is every 6 weeks she has to go to Dallas, which is where her doctor's office is and her team is, because she was born with such a severe case with her cleft lip and palate, that it's not correctable in the short term. So she does all these surgeries. She's had at least 9 major surgeries and then a lot of procedures. So they just kind of manage her condition because since she didn't have a palate, it doesn't grow particularly right. So that's why they have to do all these surgeries. But physically, she's doing great. She's kind of in between procedures. She's 15 now. She hasn't had a major surgery in probably over a year. So she's doing great. I just talked on the show about her spiritually because she's 15 now and she's at that age where she's trying to figure out, what my identity is going to be. And so we're kind of all hands on deck about, what we call come to Jesus meetings. We're trying to give her, our faith in Jesus as clearly as we can because we want her to make good decisions in life. But she's really doing well in both cases. She's doing good. She's being bold about who she is and representing her family and representing God well at school. And she's doing well physically. So thanks for the love.
My daughter, she prays for your daughter. She brings her up a lot, and she that's as soon as I told her I was talking with you, that's the question she wanted to ask you. She was always concerned, and this family is no stranger to chronic health issues, and we've made it through because of God and through prayer. We really believe in prayer, and we will keep praying for your daughter and your entire family.
No doubt, it means a lot. I mean, she just has a rough, for her first 18 years on this earth. It's just rough because it's, you think about that every 6 weeks since she's been born, she's had to take a trip to the doctor's office no matter what. I mean, that's a lot of trips to the doctor's office, especially when you're 15. And then when you have this show come up when you're a kid and there's already, something wrong with you and you look a little different, it's just put her in a tough situation. And so that's why I said I'm real protective of my daughter. And that's why I said it's something I should be doing anyway with all my kids, but we just really spend a lot of time trying to help her spiritually, mentally, and physically. And I think she's flourishing. She's one tough cookie, but it means a lot to me when people pray for her, and because I think she needs it. I think it works. I think it helps us feel like we're not alone. A lot of people that have to go through this, you kind of feel like you have 2 lives, one outside the doctor's office, and then the rest of it is your normal life. And so it's tough. I was a real non-emotional person until I had my daughter. And it's just, a lot of times in my life, I've just been in the parking lot, just bawling like a baby because it's just a tough situation to see your daughter, have to go through so much pain and suffering. But she's really doing well. And physically, I mean, we feel like we're kind of ahead of the game. I mean, the doctors are really pleased with the progress, and I think she's happy with where things are. Not really just the way she looks, but the inner workings of all her body parts as far as helping her breathe, eat, and talk. She's really ahead of the game on that. So it's been good. We're blessed.
Well, that's good to hear. And I, as a man who, tries to be self-sustaining as much as possible, I always find out, no matter what, that I am nothing. And without God, I can't handle or do anything. And when you have your children involved in something like that, you just realize how feeble we are. Now, when did you begin a relationship with Jesus in your life?
I'm one of those weird people which I think it was God's plan, that I discovered Jesus way away from a church building. My parents weren't Christians when I was a kid, and I got to see the story of Jesus told in like real life. I saw my parents, especially my dad, who was one of the worst human beings I've ever met when up until I was 8 years old. All of a sudden I see this transformation. And at 14, I kind of figured out, it was the first time I heard Jesus in a way, what he did, representing God in human form, living a perfect life, dying for our sins, coming back from the dead to show us there's a way to live forever. But I saw that as it related to my dad changing his life. And I think it's the strongest evidence that there is a God in life. I mean, there's a lot of evidences out there through creation and, the conscience, and you have the Bible and all these things that I consider evidences. But when you see somebody who's the very worst transformed to the very best because of the story of Jesus, it is a powerful moment. So at 14, I put all the things together as far as, wait a minute, that just didn't apply to my parents' life. This is something that I can get in on. So that's when I came to Christ. I'm one of the few people, that lived a Christian life in high school, which was very difficult to do. And basically, the first 2 years, I was just trying to survive because I was real shy and an introvert, which is weird to hear because I speak all over the country now. But I think that's what, so a lot of kids are like that when they have a troubled childhood, that you just kind of become, shy and stay out of the way. And about 2 years into high school, I realized that I'm not going to be able to be a follower of Jesus and be silent about it. And that's when I just started being bold. I just started telling my friends, here's why I'm not going to go get drunk with you. Or, the girls I dated, I would be like, you know what? I'm going to try to go to heaven. I'm going to treat you with respect. I'm going to wait till I get married, before we do anything intimate. And, on that level, from a sexual, frame of mind. And that's how I met my wife. I gave her my speech and she was like, sounds great to me. And so we kind of formed a spiritual relationship. And I can say, of all the things I've messed up on, my wedding night, was not one of them. I stayed pure till I got married. And I'd like to say it was some romance out, that you would make up on
Of
TV,
course.
but it was kind of like a biological experiment. But, we figured it out, and it was shame free. It was guilt free. It was, sexual disease free. I mean, I just think God's way is the best way to do that. I wanted to get that in there because when you look at some of the things that people view as old fashioned, God's way still today is the best way to do things. And when we don't do it his way, he then offers forgiveness. And that's what the cross of Jesus was all about. So that's basically my testimony in a nutshell. And, that's my top priority. I think that's why we're here on the earth. I think God uses people to share his good news of grace to humanity and the hope of life after death. And that's just what I'm here for.
That was beautiful. And, I think right there sums up why there is such, almost at times, a fanatical attraction to not only the show Duck Dynasty, but to your family, you yourself and your family.
Yeah. And a lot of people ask, what church do we go to? I go to a lot of churches. I try to, look at religion from what unites us, and basically the relational aspect of God our Father, Jesus our brother and Lord, and the Spirit as this indwelling force, that leads us. And I just say, to heck with the rest of it. Most churches, they disagree on little things that don't matter anyway. And I just think God is bigger than that, than what we do, twice a week, at a church building. And I try to live a Christian life outside the building, just in my everyday life. I think that's where all the magic happens with living a Christian life. And so that's what I want, your viewers to understand about my family. The reason we seemed happy despite our mistakes and ups and downs in life is because that's the way we view following Christ. It's more of how you live and operate in your decision process and how you overcome your flaws. Some of my family, they would post things like, oh, my younger brother had a dark past with, drugs and alcohol. And we're like, well, yeah, we've been open about that. We're not saying we don't have mistakes. We're just saying whatever we do it in plain sight so that the glory can be given to God and how he transforms our lives and makes our very worst turn into our very best.
Amen. I've got basically two sayings that I always repeat. All glory goes to God, and you can't outwit God. And I live by them, and I see that you guys do as well.
Oh, it's true. And that's what the thing that bothers me is sometimes people look at us and they think we're trying to be something we're not, or we think, oh, we're famous. And, my Uncle Si, as crazy as he is, and 99% of the things he says, I have no idea what he's talking about. But the first day of the show, he hollered that he wanted to meet with the director, and we were all apologizing for Si. We was like, look, he's crazy. He'll be great on TV because he's funny. But, disregard him. But he just kept on about it. So finally the director came out there and he said, hey, I just want you to know something. You're not directing this. God Almighty is directing this.
Wow.
And it was kind of a moment that was a mic drop and we were all looking around and, nervous about the show, or, some of us excited, whatever. I didn't really care. But when he said that, I thought, you know what? He's right. Maybe God can use just this prayer at the end, because we were a lot more spiritual on the show than what they showed, because, they had the power to edit. And but just the prayer at the end was enough for us, because we thought, in a world where families have a hard time with all the drama and what they portray on reality shows, it's kind of cool that no matter what happens, that they're going to show a family that at the end of the day, we're going to come together and love each other and pray to God and move on.
And I love it. And that's one of the things that, you guys, when you guys pray at the end of every show, like, it's just amazing to see that on television in this day and age. You don't see stuff like that.
No, it's crazy that it even got on there. I mean, the first few episodes, they were editing out where my dad would say in Jesus' name. They would edit that out because they were, I could see their point. They were trying to get everybody to watch, whether people believed in Jesus or not. And so they're looking at it from a viewership. But boy, my dad, that's the one thing he got mad about during that show. And one day we were doing a dinner scene, and when he prayed, he just prayed for the crew and for the people that put on the show. And he was like, it was a pretty stern prayer. He was like, I pray that they'll quit editing out your son's name. And so when he said amen, everybody just kind of sat there for a second. It scared the crew. And then my family all busted out laughing. And after that day, they never edited that out again. So, to their credit, they got the point. They were like, it doesn't matter what you're trying to represent from a money-making standpoint. This is who we are. And people don't have to necessarily agree with us, but, we love everybody, whether they believe or not. And I think that's another thing people miss about my family in life. We had a lot of people working on our show with, when I say the opposite lifestyle of what we live, I mean the complete opposite from everything you can imagine. But I guarantee if you go interview every person that ever worked on our show, they will. I would encourage people to do that and just ask what they think about our family. Because one thing they won't say is that we didn't love them or that we didn't become friends with them, whether they were believers or not. And I'm friends with them to this day. So I think that's a positive thing that I wanted to get out there.
Well, I think, and that's, you're doing the right thing, and you're making a difference not only on television, but it sounds like with, people you meet on a daily basis, the crew or whoever, because we're supposed to shine the light of Jesus, reflect it, and you see that on the show without being able to see all the intricate details that you just gave, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a positive thing. It's been a positive thing from, most people that get to know us, they realize that we're not like some religious people who I think incorrectly, tend to judge people and they confuse the, the love for sinner and not like the sin aspect of what Jesus offers. But, we're to be a light to everybody. And, I have friends that are not believers and they know where I stand, and I'm going to treat them with respect no matter what. I mean, that's just the way we should operate,
Absolutely.
And that's what we're trying to portray.
Now, I do have one last question for you. It's a little bit change in direction, but I ask this of all my guests because I love music, and I've got a radio station, 20thcentury.fm. We play all sorts of music from the 20th century. And what type of music are you into? What bands do you like?
Oh, this is a crazy question. My family, my wife, she can sing like a bird. It's one of the things that attracted me to her. Is the first time I heard her sing, I thought, I got to have a front row seat to this the rest of my life. Because when she opens her mouth, it is just literally gives me chills. She was just born to sing. And she's really made my family, be lovers of music. All my kids can play different instruments and they can all sing, which, I give her all the credit for that, because I'm not really a singer. I mean, I will sing in the shower and going down the road. And I was raised liking classic rock, kind of Leonard Skinner type music, just because that's what my dad listened to. And but I have an appreciation for all music, and I think that's just from being around my wife. She's into music, and we're a real musical family. But I made the decision about, I guess it's been a year ago, that I was just going to try to listen to Christian music just for the positive energy that was there, and I did it. And what I found a love for is these worship songs that I sing at church. When I listen to them on the radio, they meant a lot more when I'm singing them, on Sunday morning, if I knew the songs. And some of it's kind of cheesy, but because I think religion for whatever reason, they tend to be a little too cheesy for my taste. And they try to come up with all these catchy phrases, and I'm like, the Bible is as catchy as you need to be. You don't have to, invent all these catchy phrases. But that's been the greatest decision that I've ever made. Once I just made myself listen to it, and because now, that's my biggest thing in life, like I've talked about here, in this entire interview. So that's kind of where we're at. But my biggest thing I love to listen to, especially my son, he was just born to sing, my oldest son, Reed. And I'm telling you, there's something about listening to your son, sing from the heart, or, and be creative and write a song. So I have a lot of his songs, and, anything that I can do with my family, I'll have that tape. And when I'm really low in life, I'll slip that in there and listen to it. It's really, and then I'm like, let's go again. Here we go. I feel like I'm, Bob Seger. I like some of his songs,
Yes.
What's that? Roll Me Away. If you had to narrow me down to one song, he's like, it's not really a spiritual song, but he was down in life, and he was driving down the road, headed to California, and he saw this hawk begin to soar, and all of a sudden, he just thought, I'm going to do it again and get it right. That song's always kind of been inspirational in the secular world. So that's my take.
You can't help but love Seeger, no matter who you are.
Oh, I love that song. It's one of my favorite songs. So if nobody's ever really listened to the words of that song, it's very inspirational.
Well, music is one of the great joys and gifts from God, I believe. But hey, I want you to basically tell our listeners all the things that you're up to, or anything that your family's up to that you want to get out there, like websites or anything where they can go to hear the podcast or whatever it is. Share it with us, please. Okay.
We have the biggest thing I got going is that Unashamed with Phil Robertson. I'm sure you can Google it. We just did a media tour to promote that. I think it's an interesting, non-boring way to hear about the Bible and just, biblical principles in general. So that's one thing we're in. My dad just wrote a book. It's called The Theft of America's Soul. And usually I don't promote my family's stuff because we just kind of do our own thing. But I'm telling you, he's written 3 books, and that is by far the best one. It is awesome. It's a little political, but it's more spiritual, but it kind of shows the softer side of my dad. And so I wanted to promote that. Another thing that I'm doing is I have a website that's called CamoFlix, CamoFlix.com. And I basically post, my own hunts and like spiritual devos. So like from duck season last year. Now I haven't done anything in 3 months because I kind of took, I fasted from social media for 3 months, but I'm back now. I'm fixed to start posting again, but I wanted you to check that out. So that's really the things I got going on: the podcast, the website where I show my hunts and do videos, and I wanted to promote my dad's book. And that's basically what I got going on.
Well, I'll go and check it all out. I encourage our listeners to do it too. Jase Robertson, thank you so much for being on the show today. You were everything I imagined and much more. And also, I'm sure you can watch Duck Dynasty on different digital outlets and on TV as well. But thank you for coming on the show, and come back again sometime.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chad. I look forward to it. And your daughter, Violet, did great.